While you're experiencing the virtual heart, I'd like you to learn the key anatomic and physiologic features that differentiate the right ventricle from the left ventricle. The differences in anatomy of the two ventricles lead to important differences in physiology. It's critical to understand the main anatomic features of each ventricle and how they lead to the important physiologic differences. The right ventricle is a tripartite ventricle, which means that it has three distinct parts: an inlet where the tricuspid valve is, a body, and an outlet with an infundibulum where the pulmonary valve sits. The right ventricle can accommodate significant volume loads, but because of its shape, its physiology leads to not tolerating pressure loads well at all. The left ventricle is bullet-shaped, and it's the workhorse of the heart. It's able to accommodate significant pressure loads, such as when you exercise. You'll notice that the mitral and aortic valves are attached in fibrous continuity. Now, let's point out the main muscle in the RV that serves both as a supporting muscle for the tricuspid valve and also contains conduction pathways as well: the moderator band. The moderator band is a defining feature of the right ventricle. Let's go inside and look at the atrioventricular, or inlet valves, named the tricuspid and mitral valves of the ventricles. Now we're inside the right ventricle, where you can see the inlet valve, which is the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve, as a defining anatomic characteristic, has chordae tendineae that attach to the ventricular septum. The chordae tendineae that attach to the ventricular septum are features of the right ventricle and tricuspid valve that differentiate it from the left ventricle. Atrioventricular valve attachment to the ventricular septum is a defining feature of the RV, and it also leads to different physiologic effects as the ventricular septum contracts. Also, the tricuspid valve is placed slightly closer to the apex of the right ventricle compared to the mitral valve in the left ventricle. The last thing we're going to look at are the muscle bundles in the RV compared to the LV. The right ventricle has thick muscle bundles called trabeculations that are thicker than in the left ventricle. However, the outer wall of the right ventricle is actually thinner, as you can see here in the smaller version of the RV. The left ventricle, however, has thinner trabeculations, or muscle bundles, and a smoother inner wall. But the outer wall of the left ventricle is thicker. So let's review the main features of the right ventricle that differentiate it from the left ventricle. 1. There's a three-part ventricle: inlet, body, and outlet with an infundibulum. Number 2. The RV contains the moderator band. Number 3. The tricuspid valve attaches to the ventricular septum, and it's also located closer to the ventricular apex. And number 4. The RV wall is thin, but its trabeculations inside the ventricle are thick.